My mom, well, Nancy, as I've always called her, couldn't stand the fact that I ended up pregnant before her golden child, my half-sister. So she did something I never expected. She brought my ex back into the picture. And what he revealed, let's just say it turned her world upside down. She's been regretting it ever since. Now, I know it's strange that I don't call her mom. Most people would think that's the default, right? But Nancy made it clear from early on that neither I nor Samantha should ever call her that. I think, in her mind, Mom sounded too grown up, too mature, like it aged her somehow. She just never saw herself as that kind of woman. She said more than a few times that being called mother makes her feel old and tied down, like it's a burden she's not ready to carry. So we just called her Nancy, as if we were roommates or distant cousins instead of her kids. Nancy got pregnant with me when she was still in high school. It wasn't planned. She and my dad, Kevin, weren't exactly thinking about the future. In fact, she's always referred to my conception as an accident. That word, it stuck with me. Maybe more than she ever realized. She and Kevin were high school sweethearts, young, impulsive, living in the moment without really considering what might come next. When Nancy told him she was pregnant, he was upfront. He didn't want to stay in the relationship. He agreed to pay child support and to be part of my life, but that was the extent of it. He wasn't interested in playing house or pretending they were some happy little family. That crushed Nancy, though she rarely admitted it out loud. I think a part of her, however naive it might have been, believed that having a baby would change things, maybe make him stick around. But he didn't, and that reality hit her hard. After I was born, things didn't magically improve between them. If anything, their relationship got even more strained. Nancy carried a lot of bitterness toward my dad, and it showed. Every time he came by, whether to visit or pick me up, she'd find some reason to start an argument. It didn't matter if there was nothing to fight about, she'd find something. She'd snap at him over little things, and sometimes big ones too, but it always seemed to circle back to the fact that he didn't want to be with her. I was too little to grasp what was really going on, so I just absorbed what she said. And she said a lot things like, if he loved you, he would have married me, or, real fathers take care of their families, not run from them. Back then, I believed her. I didn't know any better. But as I got older, I started seeing things for what they really were. My dad wasn't some heartless deadbeat like she made him out to be. Far from it. He showed up every single weekend, always on time, never missed a visit. He paid child support like clockwork. And more importantly, he seemed to genuinely enjoy being around me. I felt his love, even when things between him and Nancy were tense. Over time, it became clear that he was doing everything he could to be a good dad, despite how complicated things were. He wasn't perfect, but he sure as hell wasn't the villain Nancy painted him to be. He was present, and for a kid like me, that meant everything. When I was 6, Nancy met Ronald. They ended up getting married, and she now calls him the love of her life. Watching her with him was like seeing a completely different version of her. She was softer, calmer, even kind, at times. Ronald's a genuinely good guy. Real mellow, easy to be around. From day one, he welcomed me into his life like I was already part of it. He treated me like his own, no hesitation. That meant a lot, especially given how rocky things were with Nancy. Ronald was never the issue. He was steady, patient, and he made a real effort with me, which is more than I can say for Nancy most days. Not long after their wedding, Nancy got pregnant again. This time, it was planned. She had my little sister Samantha, and I was over the moon. I loved her from the moment I saw her, and over the years, she's become my closest friend, my person. I'd do anything for her. But as much as I adored Samantha, it became painfully obvious early on that Nancy favored her. The difference in how we were treated wasn't subtle, it was glaring. Nancy showered Samantha with affection, buying her cute outfits, matching shoes, every toy she asked for. She beamed around her, her whole face lighting up when Samantha entered the room. Samantha was, and still is, Nancy's pride and joy. Me? I always felt like I was on the sidelines. Nancy kept her distance emotionally and physically. When we did spend time together, there was this tension hanging in the air, like she was just tolerating me. Of course I felt jealous. I mean, how could I not? I wanted that same love and attention. I tried, I really did. I'd ask for things: a new dress, a toy I liked, but most of the time, she'd brush me off or hand me hand-me-downs from my cousins. She'd say I didn't need anything new, that it was a waste of money. But it wasn't really about the stuff. It was the way she made me feel like I didn't belong. Like I wasn't worthy of the love she gave so freely to Samantha. That kind of favoritism leaves marks. Deep ones. Even though I love Samantha with everything I've got, I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting watching our mom, Nancy, treat her like she was the only kid who mattered. It hurt in a way that's hard to put into words. Every year when Samantha's birthday came around, Nancy pulled out all the stops. The parties were full-blown events, almost like mini weddings, with decorations, mountains of presents, and a house packed with excited relatives and friends. There were balloons everywhere, elaborate cakes, games, music, the works. You could see it in Nancy's eyes, how proud and happy she was, like throwing these extravagant parties was her way of showing the world how much she loved Samantha. And to be fair, those birthdays were magical for Samantha, anyway. For me, though, it was a whole different story. My birthdays never looked like that. In fact, they barely looked like birthdays at all. Not once was I allowed to invite friends over to celebrate. Some years, Nancy would order a pizza and call it a day. No cake. No decorations. No effort. Just a delivery guy ringing the doorbell and a few slices on the table, like it was any other night. I remember sitting there, trying not to care, but the truth is, it cut deep. Watching Nancy go above and beyond for Samantha, then barely acknowledging my birthday, made me feel like I wasn't even on her radar. It wasn't just disappointing, it felt like confirmation that I didn't matter as much. Once I got older, I started calling her out on it. I'd tell her it wasn't fair, that it hurt to be treated like I was second best all the time. But instead of owning up to it or trying to fix things, she'd fire back with something cold like, "Go cry to your father," like he was somehow the reason she treated me like that. She'd say things like, "This is all his fault," shifting the blame onto him instead of taking any responsibility herself. It was her way of dodging accountability, and she did it a lot. Meanwhile, my dad? He always tried to make up for it. He understood how special birthdays were supposed to feel, and he never let one go by without calling me right at midnight. He'd send gifts, ask how I was celebrating, even if he knew the answer wasn't great. He tried to make me feel important in the ways he could. He also saw the differences in how Nancy treated me compared to Samantha, and I know it upset him. A few times, he actually tried to talk to her about it. He wasn't aggressive or anything, he just wanted to understand why she couldn't treat both her daughters with the same care. But those talks never went well. Nancy would get defensive fast, and, before long, they'd be yelling at each other. She'd snap at him, saying things like, "You have no right to tell me how to raise Samantha," because she was married to Samantha's father, not him. In her mind, the fact that Ronald was Samantha's dad somehow gave her an excuse to give Samantha more love, more effort, more of everything. It was like I was being penalized simply because of who my father was, something I had zero control over. That was probably the hardest part. No matter how good of a kid I was, I could never outrun the shadow of Nancy's resentment toward my dad. When I left for college, it became even more obvious how little I actually mattered to her. If anything, it felt like she was relieved to see me go. The change in her was obvious. She acted lighter, like a weight had been lifted off her back. She barely called, and she never came to visit unless someone else pushed her to. When I did hear from her, it felt forced, like checking a box more than genuinely wanting to hear from me. Ironically, it was Ronald, Samantha, and my dad who made the real effort to stay connected. They came to visit, they called, They made sure I wasn't alone out there. And while I was grateful for that, it still hurt to know that my own mother didn't seem to care nearly as much. Even though the pain ran deep, I tried not to dwell on it too much. I held on to the hope that maybe someday Nancy would let go of whatever resentment she was holding and we could have a normal mother-daughter relationship. I wanted that more than anything. Then, during my final year of college, I met Timothy. He was my ex-boyfriend, but back then, things between us got serious pretty fast. He was attentive, kind, and made me feel like I actually mattered, something I wasn't used to feeling in my own family, especially not from Nancy. Graduating college was a huge deal for me. It felt like I'd climbed a mountain, and I was proud. My dad, Ronald, Samantha, and even Nancy came out for the ceremony. But to be honest, the only reason Nancy showed up was because Ronald talked her into it. I could tell her heart wasn't in it. Still, it meant something to have everyone there for once. That day was also the first time Nancy met Timothy. At first, I thought she was just being polite, but she seemed a little too fascinated by him. Then came the comments, subtle at first, but sharp. She looked at him, then at me, and said something like, "I can't believe someone as good-looking as Timothy is with you." I tried to laugh it off, tried not to let it get to me. I was used to Nancy's little digs, those snide remarks that were more damaging than she'd ever admit. Or maybe she did know. Honestly, I'm still not sure. But then she said it again, this time at lunch with the whole family, right after my graduation. She looked around the table and joked that Timothy must be dating me as some kind of charity project. Like I wasn't pretty enough or good enough to be with him unless he was doing me a favor. That one stung more than usual. It wasn't just insulting, it was humiliating. And the worst part was that she said it right in front of him. I felt the heat of embarrassment creep up my neck, and this time, I wasn't just going to sit there and take it. I turned to Nancy and, as calmly as I could manage, told her straight up that the way she was talking about me and Timothy was just plain creepy. I told her I was more than just how I looked, and that her comments were not only out of line, they were making everyone at the table uncomfortable. Timothy looked just as thrown off by it as I was. Even my dad, who usually tried to stay neutral when it came to Nancy, was visibly irritated. He kept shooting her these warning looks, probably hoping she'd knock it off before it turned into a full-blown argument. I knew he didn't want to create a scene, especially not in front of Timothy, but I could tell he was just as fed up as I was. This wasn't some harmless, offhand joke. It was one more instance of Nancy putting me down, and she couldn't even hold back on what was supposed to be one of the biggest days of my life. Not long after graduation, I found out Nancy had added Timothy on Facebook. He told me she sent him a friend request and even asked if I was cool with him accepting it. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I told him to do whatever he felt was best. I think we both knew that if he didn't accept, Nancy would find a way to bring it up later and make it awkward for everyone. Still, it struck me as odd. Here was this woman who barely checked in on me during college, but now she wanted to stay connected with my boyfriend online? Over the 3 years Timothy and I were together, Nancy kept things civil with him, cordial, distant, but oddly consistent. She'd leave the occasional comment on his posts or send a short message here and there. Nothing scandalous, just oddly attentive. It stood out because she never gave me that kind of attention. With Timothy, she seemed curious, even warm. With me? Distant, if not cold. Eventually, Timothy started pointing it out. He told me a couple of times that he felt like Nancy was jealous, not just of him, but of me. At first, I brushed it off. I thought he was reading too much into things. I had always assumed Nancy's behavior came from lingering resentment over my dad or her own personal issues, not jealousy. But Timothy kept bringing it up, gently at first, pointing out little things. The way she'd downplay my wins, make subtle jabs about my appearance, or act weirdly fixated on who I was dating. He said it felt like she was in competition with me. That idea hit me like a truck. My own mom? Jealous of me? I didn't want to believe it, but the more I thought about it, the more it started making sense. All those comments, the constant criticism, the way she always seemed to be trying to chip away at my confidence, it wasn't just indifference. It was almost like she couldn't stand to see me happy or thriving. After that realization, I started keeping my guard up more around her. I didn't let her words get to me as easily, and I stopped looking to her for approval. Something in me shifted. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. What I once saw as emotional distance now felt more like a twisted rivalry. Eventually, Timothy and I went our separate ways. After 3 years, we both realized we were heading in different directions. There was no big fight or betrayal, we just kind of knew it was time to move on. We promised to stay in touch, to remain friends. But life has a way of getting in the way of those promises. Slowly, we stopped texting, stopped calling. And just like that chapter of my life quietly closed. Then, 2 years ago, I met Jonathan, and everything changed. From the moment we started talking, it felt different. He was thoughtful, grounded, and made me feel seen in ways I hadn't before. With Jonathan, I felt safe, like I could finally breathe. We talked openly about what we wanted in life: family, love, stability, and for the first time, those things didn't feel like distant dreams. They felt real and possible. I was genuinely happy, and I didn't take that for granted. So when we found out I was pregnant, it was a shock, but not an unwelcome one. It wasn't part of some master plan, but we'd always known we wanted a family, and once the news settled in, we were nothing but excited. We jumped into planning mode, starting with a small wedding surrounded by our closest people. It wasn't some massive event, but it was beautiful. And having Samantha stand beside me as my bridesmaid meant the world. She's been my rock for so long. Nancy came to the wedding too, but something about her was off. I could feel it in her body language, the way she held herself during the ceremony. She looked tense, almost irritated, like she was sitting through something she disapproved of but couldn't quite say why. Later on, we found a quiet moment to talk, and that's when she let it all out. No hesitation, no sugarcoating. She told me flat out that she didn't think I should have married Jonathan. Said he wasn't right for me. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she admitted she had always hoped I'd get back together with Timothy. I just stood there, trying to process what I was hearing. On the happiest day of my life, my own mother decided to drop that on me. When Nancy told me she had hoped I'd get back with Timothy, I actually laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was so out of touch, it almost didn't feel real. I figured maybe she'd had a few too many glasses of champagne at the wedding and was just rambling nonsense. The idea that she was still hung up on my ex, while I was standing there married to the love of my life, was ridiculous. I tried to brush her comment off like I've done 100 times before, but deep down it did sting. Even on my wedding day, Nancy couldn't just let me have my joy. She had to take a jab, had to find a way to make it about her or about what she thought I was doing wrong. But for once, I didn't let her drag me down. I had bigger things to focus on: Jonathan, our life together, and the baby we were about to welcome into the world. I had finally found love, and I wasn't going to let Nancy's bitterness steal that from me. Jonathan and I had agreed to wait until after the wedding to share our big news. I was pregnant. We wanted the day to be about our marriage and nothing else. And when we finally told everyone, the reactions were beautiful. My dad, Ronald, and Samantha were overjoyed. Their excitement made me feel more loved and supported than I had in years. But of course, Nancy had to be the exception. Right out the gate, she questioned whether I was sure about having a baby. She said things like, "Are you really ready for this? And maybe you should have enjoyed married life first." Her tone wasn't curious, it was condescending, like she was trying to plant doubt in my mind. It didn't feel like concern, it felt like judgment. And it honestly felt like she was projecting, dumping her own regrets and insecurities about her past onto me. I couldn't believe that even during one of the happiest chapters of my life, she found a way to try to sour it. But this time, I didn't let it slide. I was becoming a mother, and the thought of Nancy trying to cast a shadow over this experience, maybe even doing the same to my child, lit a fire in me. I stayed calm, but I was clear. I told her I wasn't her. I told her I had no regrets about starting a family with the man I love, and that I felt nothing but certainty about becoming a mom. For most of my life, I let her run all over me, questioning my choices, criticizing me until I felt small. But not anymore. This was where I drew the line. That's when she finally let the mask slip. Nancy said she couldn't believe that I, the daughter she never treated like a favorite, was the one to get pregnant first. That I was giving the family its first grandchild, when she had always expected Samantha to be the one who won. I was stunned. As if this was some kind of competition? And if that wasn't enough, she went on to say she wasn't ready to be a grandmother yet, that I was ruining her image, making her look old in front of her friends. My pregnancy, my baby, somehow inconvenient to her social standing. It was a slap in the face. She wasn't thinking about me or my future child. She was thinking about herself. And that moment, hearing her speak so selfishly and so shamelessly, was the last straw for me. I told her right then and there that if her reputation mattered more to her than being a mother and grandmother, then she wouldn't be part of my child's life at all. I said I was done. Done being disrespected. Done being manipulated. Done letting her poison my life with her bitterness. Things blew up. Voices were raised. Emotions boiled over. But in the end, I asked her to leave. Since that day, Nancy's been blowing up my phone with messages, trying to guilt-trip me into apologizing. She says I overreacted, blames my pregnancy hormones, and insists she was just being honest. She actually told me that as my mother, she had the right to question my decisions about marriage and motherhood. But the truth is, she lost that right a long time ago. It's been a week, and guess what? Nancy finally backed off. Apparently, Samantha and Ronald stepped in and told her she was completely out of line. They didn't sugarcoat it either. They called her out for being selfish and insensitive and told her to drop it if she wanted any chance of staying in my life. For the first time, I think she finally believed I was serious about going no contact. She apologized, not in her usual half-hearted way, but with something that actually sounded like remorse. She promised to stop being so negative and to stop interfering in my pregnancy and my marriage. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but it felt like a start. Well, buckle up, because nothing could have prepared me for this. 3 days ago, Samantha threw me the most beautiful baby shower. It was everything I'd hoped for, sweet, heartfelt, surrounded by love. Nancy showed up, but something about her seemed off. She was nervous, fidgety, constantly glancing at the front door like she was waiting for something or someone. Then the doorbell rang. Nancy jumped up from the couch like she'd been shot out of a cannon. With this weird kind of excitement, she turned to the room and said, "I have a surprise for everyone." At first, I figured maybe it was a gift or some long-lost relative showing up to join the party. But no, it was Timothy, my ex-boyfriend. He looked completely uncomfortable, standing there in the doorway, clearly out of place while Nancy pulled him into the room like he was some kind of special guest star. I was stunned. Frozen. My baby shower, my day, and there stood my ex, being paraded around like he was part of some twisted plan. I had no idea what Nancy was thinking or what she expected to come from dragging Timothy back into my life, but one thing was clear. This wasn't about me at all. When Nancy finally opened her mouth and told me what she'd done, I just stood there, stunned. She said she'd been talking to Timothy for weeks, and had convinced him to come to the baby shower because, in her words, I deserved another chance with him. Then she looked right at me and, without blinking, said that she knew I was settling by being with Jonathan, but that I didn't need to worry anymore because Timothy was here for me now. I couldn't believe it. My guests were horrified. You could see it on their faces. Everyone was exchanging stunned, uncomfortable glances, unsure if they were watching some kind of prank or an actual mental breakdown. I kept looking from Nancy to Timothy, trying to wrap my head around what was happening. That's when Timothy, clearly embarrassed and trying to salvage the moment, spoke up. He apologized to everyone for showing up uninvited and said he never wanted to be there in the first place. That just added to the pile of confusion I was already drowning in. Then he started to explain. Timothy told the whole room that Nancy had been hounding him on Facebook, sending him message after message, practically begging him to declare some grand, undying love for me. According to her, he and I were meant to be, and I was making the biggest mistake of my life by starting a family with Jonathan. She told him I was wasting my future by becoming a mother so soon, and that he needed to show up and save me before it was too late. It was like something out of a bad soap opera. I could barely believe what I was hearing. But Timothy wasn't there to get back together. He had come to set the record straight. He told me he felt I deserved to know what Nancy had been doing behind my back. He said he was tired of being dragged into her fantasy and wanted no part in it anymore. As he spoke, the energy in the room shifted. The tension thickened. Every set of eyes turned to Nancy, whose face had turned an alarming shade of red. You could practically feel her panic. She clearly hadn't expected Timothy to say a word, let alone call her out in front of everyone. Then Timothy turned to her and, in the calmest but most cutting voice I've ever heard him use, told her to stop. Stop messaging him. Stop trying to manipulate him. And most of all, stop sabotaging her own daughter's life. He said she had no right to hijack my baby shower or interfere in my relationship with Jonathan. And for once, Nancy had nothing to say. No witty comeback. No twisted justification. Just silence. Her mouth hung open for a second, but nothing came out. She looked like she wanted to crawl under the couch and disappear. Timothy didn't stop there. He told her that back when we were together, he had always suspected she was jealous of me, and seeing her now just confirmed it. He said he was disappointed, not just for what she'd done at the baby shower, but because after all these years, she still hadn't changed. When he finished, Timothy turned back to me and apologized again, said he was sorry for the disruption, but felt it was important I knew the truth. Then, in the middle of all the awkward silence and stunned faces, he handed me a small gift he'd brought for the baby. It was a genuinely kind gesture, and despite everything, I thanked him for being brave enough to come forward and expose what Nancy had been doing. Honestly, without his honesty, I don't know if I would have ever believed it. The plotting, the lies, the way she was actively working behind my back to sabotage one of the most important times in my life. Once Timothy left, the room was dead quiet. Everyone just turned and looked at Nancy. She looked like she was about to burst into tears, not out of guilt, but out of pure humiliation. She sat frozen, like she didn't know what to do with herself now that her lies had been laid bare. That moment changed everything. It confirmed what I'd feared for years, that Nancy wasn't just difficult or emotionally distant. She wasn't just critical or cold. She was deliberately working against me, competing with me, undermining me, driven by nothing but her own insecurities and toxic jealousy. After that day, Samantha and I both cut contact with her completely. The rest of the family, who'd witnessed the whole scene at the baby shower, backed us up without hesitation. Word got around, and nobody wanted anything to do with Nancy anymore, not after what she pulled. My dad, furious beyond words, called her and told her to stay far, far away from me. He made it crystal clear that if she ever tried to show up or reach out again, there'd be consequences. To this day, I still can't fully comprehend how far she was willing to go just to disrupt my happiness. To try and insert herself into my life in such a toxic, backwards way. It's been 8 months since everything went down, and for those of you wondering, the baby was born healthy and perfect. Jonathan and I are doing great. Samantha, my dad, and Ronald have visited us several times, and we've all grown even closer through everything that's happened. None of us speak to Nancy. She's completely out of our lives now. Ronald ended up separating from her not long after the baby shower. When he finally confronted her about what she'd done, she refused to apologize. Instead, she doubled down, tried to justify it, like she always does. That was all he needed to see. He told me he realized that if Nancy could treat me, her own daughter, with such cruelty, then there was nothing stopping her from eventually turning on him or anyone else she claimed to care about. He saw her clearly for the first time, and that was enough. Her selfishness had no limits, and he knew he was better off without her.